sort of a chance for us to bring together citizen science and citizen journalism and kind of look at an intersection that hasn't been explored too much yet. And we're trying to find out what some important differences are, what some similarities might be, and things that citizen scientists can learn from citizen journalists and vice versa. And it's great that you could both join us, people from both sides. So we just want to say thank you off the top for taking the time today. So if we could just start with a little bit of introduction. You guys have been chatting already, but maybe Sheldon, if we could start with you, and if you could just tell us what drew you into citizen science?
Well, I've always been interested in science ever since I was a kid. I grew up in the wake of the Sputnik scare, when the Russians scared the hell out of us by being technically smarter, and the powers that be were smart enough to realize that having lots of science-educated and engineering-educated people was a matter of national security. And so I grew up following the space race the way most of my buddies followed baseball. And I've always been into it. I didn't go into science professionally, mostly because I had a problem with math, but I had strengths in other areas that led me elsewhere, and I ended up getting my doctorate in Near Eastern Studies. So I'm definitely avocational where science is concerned, and I sort of run the gamut. I do things from birding to marine biology to astronomy to continuing my struggle with mathematics.
Well, citizen journalism drew me because I worked for Maclean's, the Globe Mail, the Hamilton Spectator. I believe very strongly in open data, open journalism, open source software. I started sort of my leading into journalism as a nerd. I ran a blog, but I didn't start the blog to blog. I started the blog because blogging in 2003 was this new thing, and I wanted to play around with the software that powered it. So I ended up blogging for a bit and got recruited by Maclean's to be their founding reporter/blogger, and I chose that title over a traditional associate or editor or whatever title they would have given me in the organization for their online university site. And so in 2010, I had pretty much burnt myself out covering national stuff. I'd been doing it for 3 years, and I ended up returning to Hamilton. Fell back in love with journalism, doing the community level work, and today this is what I do as my full-time job. People pay me voluntarily for my journalism.
I think the amateur community is going to become increasingly important as they refine their skills, and also refine the kinds of savvy for getting access and using that access that people like Joey have developed. This is great. I think this is a wonderful thing, and in fact, sometimes I think it would be a good thing if citizen scientists were able to access the kinds of tools for getting their work out there in the public venue that citizen journalists do.
Well, one of the things that I did in Hamilton was I received access to police news releases by email. So this was when I was considered just a freelance journalist. And what I ended up doing was posting those police news releases immediately to Google Documents in their raw format. And I received some feedback both from journalists and from the police of, well, why are you doing that? Why are you, and it was the media, well, people now are able to go directly to that news release, and we got people saying, well, where it's just a cut and paste of the news release, and the police, it was, well, we put it out to the media. If we wanted it out to the wider public, we put it up on our website. But they didn't have the technical capability to put everything up on their website at the time. And I said to both, I said, is there any information in this media release to police? I would say, is there anything in this media release that you don't intend the public to know? Is there something that you're giving the media that's not meant for wider dissemination? And in terms of journalists, I would always say, the media release is a release. It's the context, it's the background, it's the knowledge, it's saying what the police do not say in a release. That, for example, this neighborhood had similar event 6 months earlier. And now the police force puts up their daily news brief to the media on their Facebook, Twitter, and their website at the same time that it goes to the media.
Wow.
And to me, one of the things that I fundamentally believe is that any information that's released by a government agency to the media is public information, period. And it should be made public at the same time that it's made available to the media.
Yeah.
And I noted that there's a police force. I was at a conference with all kinds of police media spokespeople from across Ontario, and I had drawn the fact that I felt that media releases should be public right away. Is there any reason? And I had one. Well, one journalist. Well, the public doesn't understand. They need us to give context. They can't understand a police media release. And I noted, well, the problem there is that the police are not making it understandable to the public. Not that we need journalists. Mm-hmm. And then one journalist said, well, we put it up on our Twitter and our Facebook, but we wait 15 minutes before we release it to the public. So we give it to the media, and we give them 15 minutes to get their stories out before we give it to the public. And I noted to that police sergeant, I said, so why are you privileging for-profit, shareholder-driven corporations over your own citizens? What justification is there for that? And that's the way I look at it, is that it's not to diminish the journalists, but the role of government should be to put out information. And further to that, in Canada, our Prime Minister started limiting the number of questions that he would take from the media during a campaign. He would only take 5 per day from all the media that were paying to be on his tour bus. And the media, we got very upset about that. But the general public didn't care. The general public, it didn't catch fire like I felt it should have. And I paused and I thought, well, it's because the general public has never been privy to those questions. They've never been able to watch that process live. And so I always note that when we agree that the public should not have the same level of access to public information as we do, we acknowledge then that the government has the right to restrict access to information. If citizens can get the information, it guarantees we can get the information. Any attempt by government to remove citizens from information will result in citizen outcry. Whereas if we say we're the middlemen to the citizens and we lose our access, the public is not directly affected. They're disconnected from that decrease in access. They don't get upset about it. So one of the things that we always have to remember is the more that we give access to citizens, the more we guarantee our own access to that information.
That is an excellent point. You remind me of something that happened in the wake of the Fukushima reactor disaster. The government refused to release any of the radiation readings, and so the citizen science community in Japan basically put together their own radiation detector network. And that's quite an accomplishment, because doing good radiation detection like this is fiendishly difficult. But they have done a first-class job of putting together a really good, robust system, and they've gotten the information out there where I think even now the government is still reluctant to do anything even approaching what the citizens are doing. Yeah, you're absolutely right. This kind of information needs to be made available. I'm thinking too of the reports on global warming that have been suppressed by political interests here in the United States. And to some extent, citizen science can compensate for that, but that kind of data really needs to be available to everybody.
Well, I wanted to go back to the academic journal issue, if I may, and that if the humanities is often one where a lot of their research is in these very obscure journals that are only read by people within that field. And even if I heard of something that was really interesting to me and I want to blog about it or tweet about it, and I do that sometimes, I have an aside column, which is, here's my own personal interests, indulge me, readers. I can't. And then when I used to cover higher education, I would hear of the cuts in the humanities, and they would attempt to argue that they were important, that their pursuit was advancing human knowledge, that type of thing. And I would go, okay, so where is your work? Oh, well, it's in these journals. Well, I don't have access to it. And so they're not valued. So when cutbacks occur, they occur in the humanities, there's no public outcry. And that's something for journalists to keep in mind as well. The more the public can see our work, including the mess that is validating information, the process, the more valuable we become, the less likely we are to be cut in the next round when the shareholders say, well, geez, our profit margin's not as high as it used to be.
Mhm.
If I could just change gears a little bit here, don't want to keep you guys for too long, but I just want to know a lot of the power that citizen journalists and citizen scientists have. It's often attributed to just the sheer volume of people with Twitter who are ready to report on accident, or people with telescopes looking up at the sky. But I just want to know from both of your perspectives as individuals working within that field. We'll start, Sheldon. What are the specific advantages and disadvantages of being an individual citizen scientist?
Well, one of the advantages is that you aren't constricted by some of the conventions that professional scientists are worried about. You can follow up on a crazy idea, a nutty theory that your professional colleagues might think, "Oh, you've really lost it. Your tenure is coming up. Do I really want to go there?" And sometimes that's where the discoveries happen. Another thing too is that citizen scientists are usually have to work without a budget, so they are forced to be really, really clever in how they develop instrumentation and equipment and so forth. And sometimes people can come up with some very innovative ways of doing things. I know a guy, for instance, who managed to replicate a $2,000 piece of laboratory equipment for $45 for calibrating an electronic thermometer. So, there's this aspect as well. Another thing too is that citizen scientists also have the ability to collaborate in ways that professional scientists might not think to. They can cross disciplinary boundaries. They can go places where a professional scientist might not think to go or might not want to go. Disadvantages, yeah, there are a lot of those. Access to journals is one that we've mentioned. Another one, frankly, is training. One citizen scientist is not going to know as much as another. There are a lot of them out there who are not so much amateurs but amateurish, where they don't practice good science because they don't know how. And that's something we'd like to change. I'd say that's probably the greatest weakness. The other thing too that is changing though is the Citizen Science Network is still growing, but boy is it growing, and that is, I think, going to become one of the more powerful aspects of the movement as they just get more and more interconnected.
Well, he was mentioning budget. This here is my satellite truck. I can go live on this right here. And I carry it in my backpack. And I actually just, after he said that, when you saw me go off frame and saw me moving around, that's what I was doing, was assembling this. Mm-hmm. Once I turn it on, it takes about 90 seconds before I'm live. So that's innovation there. As a journalist, you normally see a satellite truck. There's my satellite right there, the rocket stick. So it gets to training. And that's one of the challenges for... I look at citizen journalism as being where astronomy was a century ago, in terms of you start to have the tools accessible, because before that, the idea of a telescope in the backyard was, how's that possible? The ability to publish in the palm of my hand, high-quality video, I go full HD if I want to, is new. So the advantages are, A, I don't have to work 9 to 5. So the past week, March break, there's been no meetings at City Hall. I've really taken a slow week. I've focused more upon my administration. If something occurs at 2 in the morning, I don't have to ask an editor if I need to chase it. I can go out and chase it. And you know what? A lot of times I go to something and it turns out to be nothing, and I will tell my viewers and my listeners and my Twitter followers that I've come to a scene, there's a lot of police tape, there's a large situation. It's not something I'm comfortable reporting on. And that's my way of saying to my viewers that it's mental health. it's a domestic or it's involving youth, and I can walk away. Whereas in a traditional newsroom, well, you've already gone out there. We need to get something out of that investment. Whereas I can just write it off and say, you know what, I don't have anything here. And vice versa, I can go out in the middle of the day, have lunch. Every other Wednesday, I sneak out for 3 hours in the middle of the day and have lunch with a friend because it slows down at City Hall. Whereas in a traditional newsroom, you've got to put in your 8 hours straight. You can't split them. So it's the freedom that I enjoy. And it's the fact that I can do something like this. I can put together in the palm of my hand, here's a broadcast kit, not know if it's actually going to work, and not worry, because if it doesn't work, I learn from the failure. And if I may indulge, the first time I had all the kit together, I was sitting in this space about to test it, and I had not yet even tested it yet. I didn't know if it would work. A major fire alarm went in the city. It was the largest fire the city had had in 15 years. And I go, well, I saw the deputy fire chief go by my window here, and I knew right away by his driving whatever it was big, even though the dispatch had not yet said it was big. So I grab a cab, I get out there, and I go to my readers, I go, okay, I'm about to test that live system I just bought. Let me know if it works. And it worked. And no better time than right then to figure out if it worked. And that was revolutionary in that at 11 p.m. at night, I'm at a major fire scene, I'm broadcasting live video. And that's the advantage of doing independent. I can innovate because I have an itch. Whereas in a newsroom, I have an itch, I have to ask if I can scratch it.
So just as we kind of start to wrap up here, I would love if, Sheldon, if you could, based on your own experiences as a citizen scientist, what advice would you give to citizen journalists? Or would you have any questions, or what would you want to, I mean, we've been doing it, but what would you want to say to citizen journalists?
Well, I don't know that I would have advice per se, but this conversation has gotten me thinking that a lot of what citizen scientists are working on are things that would be of interest to citizen journalists. And sometimes it's hard to get the attention of the media on things because they don't always grasp what it is citizen scientists are trying to do, or they kind of are inclined to pat us on the head and say, isn't that cute? But you know, it's the immediacy that I find appealing about citizen journalism, and the fact that so much of what citizen science does is it's so very local, and it seems to me that we should be working together on some of these things that are of value. Granted, there's not going to be something every day, but I think our communities need to be collaborating on some of these things.
So Joey, is that something that you would like to see, a little bit more collaboration?
There needs to be collaboration. It needs to be as equals. There needs to be respect for citizens. I've gone out so many times, and I get it even now, where he's not a real journalist. Why is he given access? Why are you talking to him? And I was at a fire scene a couple weeks ago where that occurred, and I liked the response from the fire official that because he's media and because he's live right now. I was once actually doing a live interview with a cabinet minister, and I had a CBC reporter walk right in and go, I need to talk to the minister. And I'm live. I'm like, yeah, and I said, you're more than welcome to ask a question. Oh, no, I want to talk to him in private. Like, okay, well, let me finish off my interview. And that would not have occurred if I was CH, the proper media. And that, it has to be equal. It has to be that we share back, too. There's a reason why I use Creative Commons by attribution, share alike. It's not just philosophical. It's practical. I'm saying to people, I need your help to cover this story. I'm not hoarding the information. People don't want to give information to a hoarder. They want to give it to somebody who shares equally as well. We should be looking at science as the example, and looking at science and going, what are they doing right? What lessons can we adopt? They've been doing it for a century. I never hear an amateur astronomer's blog say, My story was stolen. My discovery was stolen. That professor took all my stuff. That professor didn't give me any credit. And that's something we hear a lot from blogs is the newspaper took my story. The newspaper took this. There are thousands of scientists. There's more scientists now than there were when amateur science began. That's the lesson for journalism, is that eventually there will be more journalists than there are right now, even with citizen journalism. We as journalists need to accept the problem is not citizens, the problem is not the internet. It's our business model. We attached ourselves to advertisers, hopped on their train, the ride was great for a while, and now it's bumpy tracks, they're heading to the cliff, and instead of looking back and going, well, geez, it was great back there, we need to look forward and go, we need to hop off this train. And citizens have a train over there that's, it doesn't have first class, but its coach is very comfortable.
You made a point about information and hanging on to information that I want to second, because the scientific culture has always been one of, hey, I've got this interesting stuff over here. Do you want to take a look at it? And they're almost communistic in that way about the way they handle data. So yeah, I think you're making a great deal of sense.
I've had stories where I've written my story, I've put up my audio, my scrum, or my video of my scrum, and I've had people very politely go, hey, Joey, I know you've had a long day, cushion it a bit, but you missed the lead. At 3 minutes, 30 seconds into this interview, there's the story. And I go, yeah, geez, I can't believe I missed that lead. Embarrassed. And then I write my story and I go, thanks for pointing out that I totally buried the lead. And I'm human. And what happens is I make mistakes. Back probably November, I made a horrible mistake. Like, just completely, I misreported a major fire incident as being at a school when it was not, because I misread the dispatch numbers. And as soon as I caught, somebody said, Joey, I think you might have misread the dispatch number. I look, oh, geez, I just misread it, and I made my correction. And you know what the response from people was? It happens. You do a lot of good work. Don't beat yourself up. Whereas when some of my professional colleagues make mistakes, people just pummel them. And it comes down to that relationship. People are not going to call you a jerk to your face in the middle of a bar. But if you leave the bar, they might be willing to say even worse things about you behind your back.
And yeah, I think that message of collaboration and sharing is probably a great place to end, and something that people from all kinds of fields can take to heart. So I just wanted to say thank you to Joey and Sheldon for taking the time today. It was great to bring these two worlds together that haven't interacted too much. So Joey, thanks so much for making the time.
And thank you. I just discovered Sheldon's work, and I'm probably going to spend the rest of the day on his blog, so I thank you for the introduction.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sheldon, as well. And we'll stay in touch.